You know that Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, but did you also know that these two totalitarian states signed a treaty of non-aggression 2 years earlier that was named the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact? Why was this pact signed and what did it include? It was also known as the Devil's Pact. Stay tuned. Hey, welcome back everybody, and if you're new, my name is Stefan. I'm a history teacher from the Netherlands and I'm hustling history for you. And if you like that, then please consider subscribing and also hit that notification bell. To understand why these two totalitarian states signed a treaty of non-aggression, we need to look at German-Soviet relations from before the moment that Hitler gained power. And these relations were established in 1922 with the Treaty of Rapallo. And it might sound odd that Weimar Germany and the Soviet Union would sign a treaty. I mean, they didn't have that much in common. First of all, the Weimar Republic was a democracy and several communist uprisings had taken place within it, and these were crushed with brute force, for example the Spartacist uprising. Furthermore, Russia was on the side of the Entente, fighting against Germany during the First World War, but then after the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, it quit the war and was then attacked by Allied interventions, which all failed, and the Bolsheviks established power after a brutal civil war. Both nations faced isolation by the international community after the Great War. They were looked down upon. The Soviets for quitting the war and fighting back during the Allied intervention, and the Germans, well, basically because they lost the war. With the Treaty of Rapallo, signed in 1922, both nations let go of financial and territorial claims. In 1926, they signed a treaty of mutual friendship and neutrality. By now, German officers and pilots were trained on Soviet soil, away from the eye of the international community. Each had something the other badly wanted. The Soviet Union wanted access to advanced military technology and military thinking. Germany needed somewhere to develop the weapons and tactical experience it was denied under the disarmament terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Things took a hit when Adolf Hitler gained power in Germany in 1933. Because of his fierce anti-communist and anti-Slavic rhetoric, it seemed that the treaty between the Soviets and the Germans might soon end. Hitler had always spoken about Lebensraum, or living space, where he envisioned the Germans to colonize Eastern Europe. However, Hitler did not change his foreign politics towards the Soviet Union, and actually the treaty between the Soviets and the Germans was re-ratified. But in 1936 also the Anti-Comintern Pact was signed between Germany and Japan, which was an anti-communist pact, and Italy later joined this pact. And during the Spanish Civil War, both the Germans and the Soviets supported the opposing parties as proxies, so to say. In the meanwhile, the Soviets didn't sit idle. They joined the League of Nations in 1934 and therefore stepping out of their position of isolation. Communist parties outside the Soviet Union were ordered to tone down their revolutionary rhetoric. And the real test came in 1938 during the Sudeten crisis. So there was a country of Czechoslovakia, and there was a Sudeten area within this country, and within this area many Germans were living. Hitler wanted to gain control of the Sudetenland. However, Czechoslovakia had a treaty with both France and the Soviet Union. So if the Germans would attack Czechoslovakia, France and the Soviet Union come to its aid. When the Czech army mobilized, also the Soviets made themselves ready, but they would only attack if France would do so. And then there was another problem. See, if you look at this map, how were the Soviets able to get to Czechoslovakia without crossing another country? Well, they couldn't. And Poland had denied Soviet access on Polish soil. Now, the Romanians, they were willing to grant 100,000 Soviet troops access through their country to reach Czechoslovakia, only if this was done quickly. And therefore I have to correct myself regarding a previous video where I stated that Romania denied access to Soviet troops to cross their country. They allowed this, but only under pressure, according to Richard Overy. Now the matter was eventually solved by negotiations, and this happened in Munich. There the Munich conference took place, where the leaders of Germany, Italy, Great Britain and France came together. The leaders of the Soviet Union and Czechoslovakia were not invited, and this here made the Soviets suspicious about Western Europe. It made the USSR rethink its position in Europe, and here the ideas for the Hitler-Stalin Pact were born. Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov, who had replaced Maxim Litvinov, he in May tried to form an alliance with Great Britain and France. But these talks deadlocked, since none of the parties was willing to trust one another. So therefore the Soviets aimed their eye towards Germany, or back to Germany. Well, actually it was the Germans that approached them in the very same month. The Germans had a plan for a quick campaign through Poland, but they weren't so sure if they would get away with this time. They weren't so sure if France and Britain would do nothing and intervene. So therefore they started to negotiate with the Soviets. But what did the Germans had the Soviets to offer? Well, that was a settlement for Eastern Europe. In July, political negotiations started between the Soviets and the Germans. Early August, Nazi Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop came with a settlement for the area in Eastern Europe between the Baltic and the Black Sea, and now the Soviets were interested. See, many of these territories had previously belonged to the Tsarist Empire and were lost in the Russian Revolution and the subsequent Civil War. On August 23rd, a plane with Joachim von Ribbentrop in it landed in Moscow, and I read that the airport in Moscow was decorated with Nazi flags that were previously used for anti-German propaganda films made by the Soviets. Arriving at the Kremlin, Joachim von Ribbentrop was surprised to meet Stalin in person, who said to him, "It's been a lovely shoving match, has it not?" Negotiations followed. The part of the non-aggression was soon agreed upon. However, about the secret protocol about the influence in Eastern Europe, that took a little bit longer, and one obstacle was what to do with Latvia, since both the Germans and the Soviets wanted Latvia. Von Ribbentrop said he had to consult with his Führer first, so he contacted Hitler, and Hitler replied 2 hours later with "Yes, agreed." Latvia was for the Soviets. While the final drafts were prepared, Stalin invited Ribbentrop to celebrate with him. Each side gave elaborate expressions of goodwill to the other. Stalin drank to Hitler's health. Ribbentrop drank to Stalin's. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the documents were ready. Molotov signed for the Soviet Union, Ribbentrop for Germany. 2 hours later, Hitler was notified at Berchtesgaden. Champagne was ordered, and Hitler, a non-drinker, sipped a little. German delight was impossible to conceal. "Now Europe is mine," Hitler is said to have cried out on hearing the news. The results were horrifying. When the Germans invaded Poland on the 1st of September 1939, a couple of weeks later, the Soviets invaded from the east. They also took the Baltic States, Bessarabia and Northern Bukovina in the following months. What happened to the people there is undescribable. Many of them were imprisoned, tortured and executed. As for Finland, well, during the Winter War, the Finns managed to fend off the Soviets for a while, but soon had to sue for peace. As a result of this, Finland only had to cede several territories and was not fully occupied. But for the inhabitants of those who were fully occupied, a grim future laid ahead. A future in prison, a future in the torture chambers, a future in the Gulag labor camps in the east, or no future at all at the deathbeds of where many met their fate. Thanks to my patrons you see on screen, and a special thanks to Henry Clarkson and Wombat Cookie. If you want to support me, go to the link right here. If you want to know more about Soviet terror in Poland, you can click right here. And if you want to know more about territorial evolution of the Soviet Union and Russia and all, you can click right here. Also consider becoming a patron, because with your donations I can keep doing this and expand. Thank you so much for watching. Do not forget to subscribe. До свидания.